Welcome to Book World, The Great Escape. I'm author CJ Peterson. My co-host over here is author Michael Scott Clifton. Welcome back. We had a pre-record last time we were here because author Michael Scott Clifton was over there on vacation. So welcome back, sir. And also, it happened to be my birthday week. This is my birthday month. Anybody who knows me knows me well that I celebrate all month long. So welcome back, Mike.
Well, it's good to be back in hot East Texas.
What you got going on in the author world?
So the Mississippi Comic Con, which is a 3-day con, is in Jackson, Mississippi, and that's coming up the end of June, the 26th, 27th, 28th. And we've been going to that for 4, 5, 6 years now, and it's always a really good Comic Con. And then, of course, with you, we'll be at the East Texas Comic Con in July 18th. I believe that's the 18th or the 19th. And then August is going to be pretty busy because we'll be at the Bell County Comic Con, which is in Belton, Texas. That's going to be August 1st and 2nd. We'll be at the Walworth Library Author Fest, which is in Greenville, Texas. There's going to be like 50, 60 authors there. And then, again, another Comic-Con that you're very familiar with, the Piney Woods Comic-Con, the end of August. So cool. That's what's going on so far.
Well, we had so much fun at Kimo Kauai. That was the first weekend of June, which you saw a picture of me in my Star Wars gear in our new beginning intro there. We were able to acquire the actual Star Wars outfit. It was by the skin of our teeth. I got it a couple days before the Comic-Con, but you saw in the pictures that we were able to get it super hubby, and I were able to debut the Star Wars outfit. Had so much fun. I was able to actually sell some books. I was super excited. It's been a while since I was able to actually go as an author. So I had so much fun doing it. I was able to talk about my books. I'm currently working on a fantasy series, so I was able to talk about that as well. So I was super excited. So much fun though. The next Comic-Con we have that I'll be running the floor for, what you talked about, was the East Texas Comic-Con. That will be in Longview, Texas. That'll be the 18th and 19th of July. So mark your calendars for that. I'll be running the floor for that one. I'll also be running the floor on the 29th and 30th of August. If you want any books for any of those, please contact me directly. You can go to cjpetersonwrites.com. You can email me at cjpetersonwrites, cjpetersonwritesa, and I will bring those with me. Also, Victoria Fan Fest has been announced. That is the 18th and 19th of September in Victoria, Texas. So please make sure that you can message me directly for those. Again, I will bring my books, but I run the floor for those Comic-Cons. We'll be having those there. You can make sure to, again, if you want me to bring my books there, I will bring those there, and I can sell you those there as well. Today, we are going to be talking about pros and cons of critiques. And this is topically based today. Next week, we will be having an author, Jason Greer, aka Sengard. He is a science fiction author. So we'll have him next week. But today we're talking about pros and cons of critiques. I'm kind of excited about that one because I was able to last year go to a writing conference. And in that writing conference, we did paid critiques. So a couple of people were able to come to me directly, and they brought me some of their stuff. And I was able to read it, and I was able to actually do critiques for them. So I understand the importance of them. Mike, what about you? Have you ever done them? Have you ever had somebody do them for you?
So, yes, to all of that. When I first joined NetWo, which is a Northeast Texas Writers Organization, they had a critique group, and it was part of their monthly meetings. Of course, with as you can imagine, if you have a meeting that might last an hour and a half, the time to do any kind of in-depth critique would be limited, and of course the number of critiques as well. And then there are writers' conferences where that I attended, where we had actual agents that would come in, publishers that you could submit, chapters, samples of your work, and they would critique that as well. And then they would give you and it was part of whatever the price of the conference would included those critiques. Um, but for the last 5 or 6 years, I've belonged to a critique. Actually, it's been longer than that. It's been like 6 or 7 years, which meets locally, and we meet every week on Tuesday, and we have a process by which we submit chapters the week before, and then that gives us a week to critique each other's work, so to speak, and then have that with us when we come back the following week. So you have to send it a week ahead of time.
Okay, hold on just a quick second. We have a couple comments. First, someone wanted to know what it is, and then Mombi's here. So let me explain, first of all, what we're talking about. A critique is when you submit a small work of art, a small work of your writing to a group or an individual who takes the small bit of writing, and actually weeds through it. They are kind of like writer's scripts. I'm explaining what it is. Or it's an individual. In my case, it was an individual. So in the writing class that I had gone to, they had submitted a small writing segment to me, and I was able to read through it, and I was able to critique it. Some people, when I read through something, I do what's called a compliment sandwich. I go through and I find things that are good, and I find things that need improvement, and I give it to them in a compliment sandwich. I tell them things that are good. I tell them things that need improvement, and then I end it with things that they did good. So it's a compliment sandwich. I don't like to decimate an author. I know some people who have done that to authors, and I don't like doing that. I like to encourage other authors. I have seen other authors just rip other authors apart, and I don't think that's a good thing. I think that's a critic.
Oh yeah, that could
I don't
destroy.
feel that that's a proper way to do a critique.
No, and there's different ways to critique, which of course we will talk about in the course of the podcast today. And I think everyone's is different. For example, there's 3 different critique, like around this area that I know of. There's a critique group that meets once a month. There's a critique group that meets every other week. And then there's a group such as ours that meets weekly. Now, one of the things you mentioned that about, you like to not to decimate authors. So today it's about the pros and the cons. So
Mombi wants to know, okay, so like an author that kind of guides for editing or improving your story or style. Yes, it can be a group or it can be an individual. It can be either.
Well, yes. It depends on the makeup of your critique group.
Yeah. For example, it can be a group or it can be an individual. So for example, on the writers conference, it was an individual. Mike is talking about a group. It can be either or.
Right. Like if you go to one of the bigger writing conferences, they may have agents or publishers there, and you can submit you can submit a longer piece sample, if you will, than like you would.
Chapter. They submitted a chapter to me.
So you could submit a larger sample of your work but you have to send it in like a month or so in advance. You have to have time to sort of look at it. Now, it depends, I guess, on how often that you meet as well, because if you're a monthly, if you're a biweekly, or if you're weekly, that will depend on how big a sample that you use to critique. So I know, like I said, I know different ways that people do critiquing. Going back to the pros and cons, I was one of those, going back to what you were saying, CJ, that a con, one of the worst things you can do if you are someone that's part of a critique group, especially if you're an experienced author, you have been published, and you've honed your work, your craft, so to speak. The worst thing you can do is take a not a young, a beginning author, a beginning writer, and totally trash what they have written. It's the worst possible thing that you could do to someone who is new to writing, who is trying to find their way. You cut their legs literally off at the knees. And often, and this was the case almost with myself, they just decide, well, I'm no good at this. I'm just not going to try it. I'm just going to fold my tent and go home. And I didn't write anything for 2 years.
Which is sad because I have read your books and they are amazing. And that would have been horrible because your books are hands down incredible. And had you stopped, it would have been a disservice. And that would not have been good.
Right. And the other thing you said too, where you always find something good, that's like those two things, being too negative or not offering any positive feedback, again, are two of the worst things that someone can experience that's on the receiving end of a critique, or one who is on the giving end of the critique. If it's you've seen work, CJ, that someone has written that probably wasn't real good. We've seen it, but we can find something that they've done that's good to give them some reinforcement on. And to me, that's even more important than the critique part where, hey, I think I'd change this up a bit or do this a little bit better. So if you provide only negative and nothing positive with a critique, I don't think that it's really it's just not, it's not good practice.
Well, and even some of it's your own stories. For example, mine is the word that. If you have somebody who's reading your stuff and you catch your little idiosyncrasies, mine was the word that. I put in the word that way too many times. And if you catch those little idiosyncrasies and you tell them the stories, your own stories, and you make it funny, that sometimes lessens the blow.
Mine was adverbs, LYs, every other word, LY. He exclaimingly said.
If you can lighten that up a little bit, it helps immensely. Mommy wants to know, do they cost money or dues? Yes.
Well,
mine did. Mine did because it was a paid critique. And so it was over and above the amount of the cost of the conference itself. When it's something like that, yes they are. I don't know if Mike's critique group is or is not.
Well, the conference was, where you got a professional, like an agent or publisher. Yes, they're going to cost money. Yes, they will. But a weekly or bi-weekly or monthly critique
they may or may
authors, not. The good thing about now the other
or
thing
about in your case, you have a BFF,
right? Yes. So I was thinking about this because I was real excited about today's podcast, because I think it's really important, as whether you're an experienced author or whether you are one that's just starting out or you're somewhere in between, to have a good critique group to be able to to run your work or even be part of, so you can give critiques of your own. I think I've learned more. I don't know about you, CJ, but I think I've learned more from critiquing other people's work than I have, my own. It's helped me immensely.
Well, you learn their writing styles. It's
right.
When you have a really good author or a really good editor, content and copy editor, it's the same thing. Your copy and content editor, if you have a really good one, it's like mine is, if she's looking over my shoulder and she's like, stop that. Don't do that. Did we not talk about this? My editor is vicious and I love her for it. If you have a really good critique person and they're good at what they do and how they say it, and they do it in a way that's not threatening, and they do it in a way that is good, and it doesn't hurt, but it helps, and it's a critique and not a critic, then you can move forward and be okay,
Right.
that's good. But being the person who's doing the critique, you're also reading somebody else's work. And so you see somebody else's style. And that's the cool thing about doing critiques, is that you can see somebody else's style and like, oh, that's kind of really cool. I like that. And so you're able to read other styles as well. You
I
know,
think
so you're able to
you have to be open, especially if you have been writing for a while.
Mhm,
You do tend to be a little bit chauvinistic when it comes to your own writing,
mhm.
and you have to be able to. Because I have found that again, there's also a reverse effect. Once you have been doing this for a while, that you feel like your writing's bulletproof. You know that they don't know what they're, this critique or this person, yeah, I really like. They don't know what they're talking about. I think I'm going to keep. You have to be able to take criticism, not necessarily. And when I say you have to be able to take suggestions,
Yes.
and not just think, well, no, that I'm just not going to do that. For example, using that, using there's things I see that pop up with the critiques that we do, gerunds, LYs, passive voice, all of that, which of course, if you've been doing this for a while, you know what we're talking about. That's something that you can actually find in your own writing, because what I have learned, CJ, with over the and I'm sure you've seen the same thing, is you can read something out loud 100 times. You can voice it in your head 100 times, and you still miss a mistake because a different set of eyes hasn't looked at it, just you.
Mommy has a good question. She said, "What do you need both an editor? Would you need both an editor and critiques, or is an editor more for one specific work and critiques is overall for writing?" So, Mommy, here's the thing. You don't need a critique. They just help sometimes. It's kind of like a beta reader. It's up to you whether you want a critique or not. It's just an extra person. The editing is a must. I would honestly say that that is a definite must. If you're writing a book, a content and a copy editor are definite musts, and they are two separate things. Content and copy are two separate things. Just keep that in mind. And they are definite musts. Critiques are kind of like a beta reader. It's you can do it or not do it. It's up to you. It's just an extra set of eyes.
Now, if you have a critique group that, because you could have a critique group that actually has an editor, or in a former life with an editor. You can have they can serve all of those things depending on the makeup of your critique group, because basically, to me, the value of a critique group, besides making your writing better, is they're serving the function of a content editor and a grammar editor by looking over your work and pointing out things that you have either done wrong or that you need to change. Now, again, it depends on your confidence in who is in your critique group, and if they have experience in this. But you can have all of those things within the critique group that pretty much perform those functions for you. But again, it depends on who is part of the critique group. I'm fortunate that the critique group that I'm in has some very experienced authors in it that in another life they were editors, and that's what they did for a living. So we're kind of fortunate with that, and it just if you are, I think it just depends on, because I've known people that have spent thousands and thousands of dollars on editing that that they, I don't know. Again, it depends on the situation, but thousands and thousands of dollars, and a lot of the things when I've talked to these people, a critique group could have uncovered or suggested that they do. So, um, you know, I used an editor for my first two or three books, but since then I've used the critique group And I think my books have been pretty solid in terms of content and editing. So I think I'm lucky in that regard, and I know everybody doesn't have that advantage.
Now, here's a con to this, and this is a here nor there. Now, this is a preference, because we're talking pros and cons.
Sure.
Not everybody prefers critique groups. I'm one of those.
That's true.
I prefer to keep my stuff in-house. I protect my work fiercely. I prefer to go straight to my copy and content editor. I prefer to not go to a critique group because I prefer to protect my work. I've heard horror stories of people getting their work stolen from beta readers. The same thing can happen into a critique group. Who knows? Sure. So I prefer to not have my work stolen.
Well, it depends on, again, on who makes your critique group and how confident you are in
them. Yeah, it's your level of trust. Do you trust them?
Right.
So that could be a con.
And
so just putting that out there.
Right.
You trust your group implicitly, and that's fine. That's just a con. I would have a really hard time with that.
Well, not everybody has access to the critique group that I'm.
Exactly.
Not everybody has that, and
and not everybody has a trust level. I don't.
It's true.
That's what I said. That's what I say. And so that's what I'm saying is that I don't have trust level in beta readers, and I don't have trust levels in other groups. I've heard the horror stories, and that's a con for me.
Yeah. I think another con is that again, the critique groups I'm familiar with, they may meet monthly, bi-weekly, every week. The other con to that is, I know in your case, CJ, you write very fast, and I mean that in a good way, not a bad way. And so it really wouldn't benefit you for some critique groups because your volume of work is just more than they can really process or critique.
Yeah, I'd have to wait my turn. I'd be like, no, I don't have time for this.
So it does, depending on your critique group, it could limit how fast you write a book if you're using them to vet your books, whether it be by chapter, section by section, or whatever. So that can be limiting.
Monby says, yeah, that's not good. Definitely an issue of being trustworthy. Makes sense. And that just depends on your people. Like, you've worked with them for years. So your group, you trust them implicitly, and that's fine. But for me, I have trust issues, and like you're saying, for me, I write way too fast.
Right.
So, and I know that you write a lot slower than I do.
Or deliberate, yes. Yes.
So for you, it works great.
Right. It does.
I know for Jana.
Yeah.
Jana. I know that beta readers work great for her. They would slow me down and it would drive me nuts. And so, it depends. Each author is different. And so for each author, it just depends on how it works. So for me, my editor and her copy editor, we work great as a team. And so it's like, I contact her, I say, okay, this is my date. She's like, yep, nope, we're good. And I ship it off to her, and she gets it back to me within like a month or so, and we're done. We're golden.
Well, I've noticed, I think the makeup of your critique group is also important. I know some authors, for example, let's say they write romance, okay? They are in partnership with another romance author, and they critique each other's stuff. Mm-hmm. So, one critiques the other one's stuff or chapter because their genre is the same. So, the markers, how they write, all of that would be something they would be familiar with. I think too that depending on, with the digital age we live in now, a critique group is only one click of the mouse away because you have StreamYard, you have Zoom, you have all sorts of digital platforms that you can meet face to face via the internet. Mm-hmm. And have a critique group. I think this is my preference, but it's the one I'm most familiar with, so I'm a little prejudiced, you might say. I like to have a more diverse group of authors as part of a critique group. Not everybody science fiction, not everybody romance, not everybody historical fiction or thrillers or fantasy, because I think that gives you a wider group of opinions on the on your writing and what you're trying to achieve. I think that if you're I write, I write mostly fantasy, science fiction. And if I only was in partnership with other fantasy and science fiction authors in a critique group setting, uh, it would be somewhat limiting in the sense that we're all pink elephants in the same room.
Mm-hmm.
There's some things you just can't see that way. Whereas if you had somebody that doesn't read that genre or write in it, they might be able to offer suggestions that never ever would have been made with this same group of like-minded people, authors, so to speak.
Yeah. And I mean, I write a variety. So for me, I'm on 19 books right now. And so for me, I don't necessarily fit into one group either. Critiques are great for, like I said, if you've been in a group for a long time.
Right.
Or if you were a new author trying to figure out, hey, am I on the right track? That's also another great one.
Right.
And don't be afraid to do it either. It's not necessarily something that you should be afraid to do. Some people are like, well, I don't know if I want to do it or not. It's kind of like, hey, I'm giving you my baby. Please don't squish my little heart. Please don't squish my little heart. And those who are doing critiques, please don't squish the little heart.
Right.
Don't be a critic. Just be nice. I mean, it's not that hard to be nice. You are taking their work and just go through it and tell them, hey, you can do better here. This was awesome here. This was really good. You might need to sharpen this up a little bit here, but this was really good. It's not that bad over here. Sharpen this up right here. This was a repeat over here. You've got this going as something you might want to look at that you do a little too much. That's all they're asking for. It's not rocket science.
Going back to what we started off saying, I think Bear is repeating toward the end of the podcast here now, is that in a critique group, the worst thing you can do is to mercilessly criticize somebody's work, especially someone that is just new to writing and being an author. And no matter how bad it is, no matter how hard it is to try to find something that they did right, always try to give them some positive affirmation. Say, hey, you did a good job on this part. This piece here was great.
Exactly.
And get positive reinforcement.
Exactly. Well, in the meantime, make sure to check out your own work, do your stuff. You can't do anything unless all the sand is in the box. So keep writing and do your thing. So next week, we're going to have, like I said, Sandgard, aka author Jason Greer, for science fiction next week. Same time, same sandbox. Check it out. See you guys next week.